Breaking news. Vladimir Putin has now given Keir Starmer exactly 72 hours to reply, or face consequences so serious that Downing Street refuses to describe them publicly. Westminster woke up to turmoil this morning. Just after sunrise, the Foreign Office received an encrypted communication sent directly from the Kremlin. Staff expected the usual type of complaints, diplomatic pushback, sanction threats, the typical accusations about spying. But what arrived wasn't routine at all. Government insiders say the message was blunt, forceful, and delivered with demands that left senior ministers clearly unsettled. Within only a few hours, emergency discussions were underway throughout Whitehall. Intelligence leaders were pulled out of their scheduled briefings. Military officials received immediate alerts. And Starmer's administration moved straight into crisis mode, the kind usually reserved for active threats happening on British soil. If this situation matters to you, hit subscribe now because things are changing by the hour and the next steps could be huge. Here's what we know at this point. The Kremlin's message accused the United Kingdom of crossing a major red line. Russia claims Britain was involved in covert actions that supposedly endangered Russian national security and destabilized the region. Moscow demanded an immediate reply, and according to leaked intelligence summaries released later in the day, that demand came with a firm deadline. For now, Downing Street refuses to release the full contents of the communication. The phrase national security reasons has been repeated so often today that it no longer sounds like an explanation. It sounds like a wall the government is hiding behind. But the silence speaks for itself. When ministers avoid direct questions, when the Foreign Office refuses to confirm even basic details, when every official statement sounds polished and overly careful, people pick up on that. And the public is now asking the most obvious question of all. What exactly is the British government hiding from its own citizens? The refusal to be open is only making the speculation worse. Social media is filled with guesses and theories. News channels haven't stopped running updates. And every hour that passes without clarity, public frustration gets louder. Inside the House of Commons, tensions exploded almost immediately when the day's session began. Starmer stood at the dispatch box, speaking calmly but with clear strain in his voice. He insisted the UK had not broken international law. He praised British intelligence services. He promised stability, strength, and an unshakable focus on national security. But MPs weren't buying it. Not at all. Conservative backbenchers pushed for total transparency. They accused the Prime Minister of hiding behind vague assurances, while the country faced a real threat. Reform UK went further, claiming the government had provoked a nuclear-armed nation without a workable strategy or a plan to step back from escalation. Even Labour MPs who normally defend the front bench looked uneasy. They shifted in their seats, exchanged worried looks, and waited for details that never came. The chamber turned into a boiling pot of anger and pressure. Accusations were thrown across the room. Shouting echoed against the historic walls. Points of order were raised, dismissed, raised again. And through all of it, one question kept dominating everything. What is in that Kremlin message that the government refuses to reveal? Starmer repeated his earlier statements almost exactly, offering nothing new. When Parliament finally adjourned, MPs were more unsettled than when they walked in. This is where the situation grows significantly darker. Multiple sources who spoke anonymously because they weren't authorized to share classified information claim that Putin's warning had a second section, a part that Downing Street has kept completely hidden not only from the public, but even from most members of Parliament. According to those sources, Russia's demand wasn't just about intelligence activity or diplomatic tension. It was much more targeted and far more dangerous. Moscow reportedly wants Britain to pull back active support for a key Eastern European ally, a move that would damage Western unity, weaken NATO's defensive position in the East, and send a message to the region that British support can crumble under intimidation. If this information is correct, it leaves Starmer facing an impossible choice. If he agrees, Britain looks weak on the world stage. Allies start doubting the UK. Decades of partnerships and security agreements could fall apart overnight. And every hostile nation watching would learn that pressuring Britain leads to results. If he refuses, Britain stands in direct confrontation with a nuclear-armed country, already involved in the largest land conflict in Europe since 1945. A country that has repeatedly shown it will endure heavy losses to get what it wants. There is no good path here, only a scale of bad options. And everyone in Westminster knows just how tight the margins are. Inside the House of Commons, tension erupted almost as soon as the session began. Starmer stood at the dispatch box, speaking carefully, but the tightness in his voice was obvious. He insisted that the UK had followed international law at every step. He praised the work of British intelligence. He promised stability, strength, and complete dedication to national security. But MPs weren't convinced. Not even remotely. Conservative backbenchers demanded full and immediate disclosure. They accused the Prime Minister of hiding behind unclear statements while the country faced a real and growing threat. Reform UK went even further, arguing that the government had provoked a nuclear power without any real plan or strategy. Even Labour MPs who normally defend the leadership shifted uncomfortably. Some exchanged uneasy looks. Others sat silently, waiting for answers that never came. The chamber quickly turned into a pressure cooker. Accusations flew across the room. Voices echoed off the old stone walls. Points of order were raised and brushed aside. And through all the noise, one question kept cutting through everything. What exactly is in that message that the government refuses to reveal? Starmer offered nothing new. He repeated his earlier statements nearly word for word. And when the session finally ended, MPs walked out more frustrated than when they walked in. This is where the story turns much darker. Multiple sources, all of them speaking anonymously because they were not authorized to discuss classified briefings, claimed that Putin's warning included a second section. A section that Downing Street has kept completely hidden from the public and even from most MPs. According to these sources, Russia's demand was not only about intelligence activity or diplomatic disagreements. It was far more specific and far more dangerous. Moscow reportedly wants Britain to pull back active support from a key Eastern European partner. A move that would weaken Western unity, disrupt NATO's defensive position in the region, and send a message to nearby countries that British commitments can collapse under pressure. If this is accurate, Starmer is facing an impossible situation with no clean solution. Agree to the demand and the UK looks weak on the global stage. Allies would question Britain's reliability. Long-standing partnerships and security agreements could start to fall apart overnight. Other nations would learn that threatening the UK leads to results. Refuse and Britain risks direct confrontation with a nuclear-armed country that has repeatedly shown it acts on its warnings. A country currently involved in the largest European land conflict since 1945. A country that has already shown it's willing to absorb heavy costs to accomplish its goals. There are no good choices, only options that range from bad to worse. And everyone in Westminster knows exactly how narrow and dangerous the path ahead has become. Outside Parliament, people across the UK made their voices heard. Within hours of the first reports, protesters filled Westminster Bridge. The crowd was mixed. Some held Union Jack flags and called for strength in the face of foreign pressure, insisting that Britain must never give in to threats from any country. Others carried signs demanding transparency, accusing the government of hiding the truth from the very public that elected them. The atmosphere was intense, emotional, and unpredictable. Police lines held steady as crowds pushed closer. Helicopters hovered above, their blades slicing through the noise below. News cameras captured every tense moment, every confrontation, every chant shouted between protesters and officers. This wasn't staged outrage or political theater. This was a nation trying to make sense of a situation filled with uncertainty, and a public unwilling to stay silent, while their leaders make decisions that could affect every household in the country. By the evening, protests had spread to Manchester, Birmingham, and Edinburgh. The crisis was no longer just a Westminster issue, it had reached the rest of the country. Then something unexpected happened. Buckingham Palace, which almost never comments on political matters, and usually stays well above the government's daily struggles, issued a rare public statement. It was short, direct, and impossible to overlook. His Majesty remains fully informed and deeply concerned about the evolving situation. Experts in constitutional matters quickly pointed out how significant those words were. When the monarch steps into the edge of a geopolitical crisis, even symbolically, it shows the situation has moved far beyond normal politics. It signals that the stakes are now high enough that the head of state feels the need to recognize the moment publicly. Royal reporters noted that senior palace staff were seen moving quickly through the corridors throughout the afternoon. The king was receiving regular updates. No further statements were released, but the meaning was clear. The monarchy is watching and expects this crisis to be handled with the seriousness it deserves. This was no longer just a government problem. It had become a national one. That heavy distinction hung over Westminster like a dark cloud. Across the Atlantic, the White House acted with unusual speed. It issued a statement supporting the UK only hours after the story broke, condemning what American officials described as aggressive and destabilizing language from Moscow. The statement praised British leadership and reaffirmed the close, unbreakable relationship between the two countries. But even this raised new questions. Why did Washington respond before Downing Street had settled its own public messaging? What coordination took place privately between the two governments before anything was said publicly? And most importantly, what does the United States know that the British public still hasn't been told? Reports from Washington suggested American intelligence had been tracking the situation for days before the message arrived. If that's true, it means the UK had advance warning, yet still seemed caught off guard by the public reaction. The speed and strength of America's involvement suggests this crisis goes far beyond Britain's borders. Whatever Putin wrote in that message clearly set off alarms in more than one Western capital.